Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Brian Crooke, a very dedicated well-being educator, consultant, and speaker who has been making a significant impact on workplace mental health and well-being in Ireland and beyond. Brian and I met over a year ago, and I instantly knew that he had a powerful message to share about the health and well-being of all employees. Brian is the founder of the Work Well Institute, the course director and lecturer for the postgraduate certificate in workplace well-being at Portal Trinity College in Dublin, and the founder of Workplace Wellbeing Ireland. As the host of the Work Well podcast, Brian also empowers organizations with their tools and strategies and educational content to sustainably improve workplace well-being. Thank you so much for being with me, Brian, today. We were chatting a little bit earlier, so we warmed up, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey and where you are and your inspirations, to join this movement that we all want to be a part of, that getting people healthier in their workplace?
Sure. Well, thank you, Tobba, for that introduction, and thank you for the invitation to join you today. It's a real privilege. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and the really exciting work you're doing with Connect over the last year or so.
Thank you.
You said most of it there, but I'm a recovering management consultant. So I worked in the tech industry for 10 years before I entered this space. While I was in technology, and it was a consultancy role, so I was spending a lot of time in different workplaces. I had a passion for health and well-being, in particular physical health. I qualified as a gym instructor, personal trainer, sports nutritionist. So they were real passion areas of mine. Over 10 years ago, I remember trying to introduce some of those behaviors, and you would call them interventions, I suppose, into my different workplaces. So anything from five-a-side football, which I set up, to walking groups, lunchtime walking groups. I had lunch and learns on the go as well. But fairly quickly, I noticed that, well, a couple of things. One, most of my colleagues were far too busy to attend a lot of what I was organizing. And two, there was a lot more to this workplace well-being or workplace health promotion than something related to physical activity. So I started a blog around this time again, about 10 years ago, a little bit more actually. And I called it Office Worker Health. And so I was researching a bit. I was writing an article. I was quite consistent every week, kind of trying to explore this idea. I came across an organization called WellCOA, the Wellness Council of America, who seemed to be approaching it in a really practical way that I hadn't seen in any Irish setting, certainly even in any European setting. And they had a kind of 7 practical benchmarks about how they implemented or embedded a culture of health in a workplace. So I joined that. I became a member. I did their certifications. I kind of brought that back to Ireland. I started talking about that in my blog. I did a postgrad in entrepreneurship and innovation, kind of looking at how can I turn my blog, what I'm talking about, into kind of more of a business, and I can impact people. So from that, it led me to, rather than jump in and go from being an IT management consultant to a well-being consultant on day one, I said, well, let me hold back here. Let me be the facilitator, because I was having good conversations with people in companies that were doing interesting work, but they weren't sharing that publicly. There was no forum to share that publicly. So I said, well, I can be the person that creates that forum. That's where it really started, where I created Workplace Wellbeing Ireland. We had our first meetup in September of 2018. And effectively, I had a couple of speakers. There was a couple of people from inside a company talking about what they were doing, pretty much. And so it was a forum for the well-being lead, the mental health lead, maybe a well-being champion or two, maybe a HR lead, to what is normally quite an isolating role, to bring them together. And there was 100 people came to that first event. So I knew there was clear interest in this space. Here's a bit of a group for us, a forum for us, where we can hear from others, we can learn from what's going on in other organizations, and we can kind of raise our own boat, if you like. But that's kind of where it started, the facilitator piece, and I get to learn from people every single week. There is now over 4,000 plus members.
Wow.
In that group. They get a weekly newsletter. There's the podcast, as you mentioned. There's a forum to ask questions. There's live events. And that's all the free content. Yeah. And off the back of that, I was able to kind of, from talking to people, from listening to their needs and wants, kind of identify where there was kind of real, maybe let's say a skills gap or a need for some kind of deeper education and training. And so the training courses that I've developed for leaders, for champions, and for line managers was developed as a result of that, just listening to the needs and wants. So it's pretty much developed from there. And then I was delivering a training course. My old contacts at Trinity, where I did the postgrad, were aware of it. So they asked me, do you think there's a postgrad in this? So we, along with Dr. Sarah Jane Cullinan, I designed a postgrad back in 2019. And we're in our 5th year. There's 92 students this year. The interest is really, really growing in this space, and it's only going to continue to do so.
Well, that's really good news to hear. And it's amazing. Congratulations on this. You're scaling this in a different than tech way, but you're scaling people to make impact. It's amazing. And in the beginning there, I'm curious, how these things evolve. What did you hear? You probably got people that were doing something or were inclined to, but what was the barrier they were facing then? And do you think the barriers are gone or lowered?
Barriers are not gone. But back then, so 10 years ago, when I spoke about, if I mentioned the term workplace well-being, people thought I was talking about physical health, yoga or classes or something along those lines. Within the last 5 to 8 years, now some people think maybe it's only mental health. A bit of progress there. That's good. We're definitely more conversations around that.
Yeah.
And since the pandemic, then I think we've broadened the conversation to be a bit more holistic. It's physical, mental, social. That has been a real challenge, I think, for organizations in that they really don't have any kind of definition of what well-being is. They have very well-intentioned people, a leader or a lead, who's just looking to do something. And unfortunately, that usually leads to some random acts of wellness in an organization, which unfortunately gives programs a pretty bad name because they don't really lead to anything of benefit for the organization or for the individuals involved. So that has definitely been the challenge. And it still exists to this day. However, we are moving to a place where a little bit of structure, kind of formalized structure, is emerging. That is thanks in large part, I would say, to WHO, their healthy workplace model. Published only in 2010. And I'm delighted that Healthy Ireland adopted in 2021 the very same structure. They're looking at the 4 avenues of influence being the personal health resources, psychosocial work environment, physical work environment, and the communities, internal and external communities. So it allows a little bit of structure, and early adopters, mostly government organizations, I would say, are adopting that very same structure, certainly in Ireland, with a bit of structure, a little bit of legislation and policy. Early adopters, still plenty of resistance, but this is the way it happened. This is a bit like 35 years ago in the health and safety industry. Early legislation, some early adopters, lots of resistance. I'm not wearing that hard hat, wearing that high-vis jacket, but nobody would question that today. It takes a little bit of time, but I think that's exactly where we're at.
Do you think, like, for that health and safety regulations, do you think more of those 4 pillars are going to go into that regulation, or, if you will, like rules and regulations?
Well, it's an interesting question. And it's a question we talk about quite a bit on the postgrad. Where does or where should well-being sit? Historically, it has probably sat within HR. In most organizations, not all. But I am seeing a growing trend towards health, safety, and well-being. If you look at any health and safety conference in the last 2 years, it's probably a health, safety, and well-being conference now.
Exactly.
But I do see health and safety practitioners adding, and we do have a few on the program this year that are adding well-being to their skill set. And of course, a huge advantage that they have is their risk management approach. They have that risk-based skill set, which maybe most HR professionals don't. Some will, of course, I'm sure. But I think that's an excellent primary preventative approach if you're approaching from a risk management perspective. So
it's turning a little bit that way. It's our feeling as well. It's
right?
Different people set of skills that is working on the health and safety than in the HR. But the merging of it is really interesting, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you see it in that direction? Do you see that's what's happening?
We see that the protocols are changing to be adding mental health on top of the health checks. We still see that this is in silos, and the health checks are asking for mental health checks on top of it, and then the supply of support is maybe missing. So it comes together in some of the companies that are very security oriented, but then in others, like in desk jobs, there's no real that kind of a feel. Security feel is less. It's like you said, it's different profiles, but it's very interesting to hear that they're coming to your program. That's
Yes.
That's a trend.
I've been asked to speak at a few health and safety conferences recently as well. So
Yeah.
they're clearly dipping their toe in the water.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. And another real interesting change or trend that's happening in Ireland certainly is, for last year, the Health and Safety Authority, HSA being the authority responsible for enforcing the 2005 Safety, Health and Welfare at Work Act. And as part of that act, Irish organisations are obliged to complete a risk assessment and maintain a written safety statement.
Yeah.
That should be kept up to date. Now, I think it's probably fair to say that to date, or at least until very recently, that has been a physical safety statement, physical risk assessment. So interestingly, in their program of work for last year, the HSA called out that there would be up to 10,000 proactive inspections, and that psychosocial risks would be high on the agenda as part of their audits.
Oh, wow.
That is a real kind of change. The legislation hasn't changed. The legislation is very well written, as you would imagine. It doesn't say this is physical only, but they are clearly changing their approach to this. And I see last year as a bit of a, I don't know if we call it a warning, but just like a heads up. That written safety statement that you should have been certainly maintaining for the last number of years, that also now needs to include psychosocial risks and hazards.
Yeah, this is definitely a clear message. Do you have like a top 3 mistakes when companies are implementing well-being into the companies that you want to share with listeners?
The big one is related to those random acts. So they haven't done anything from a strategic point of view. They haven't, like a marketing department or IT or sales, what's your 3-year plan? Have you set a plan for what you're doing? Have you set targets? Have you got something to aim toward? So do you have a strategy? So that's one. And if you have something like that, you're working towards something, it's not random anymore. The other, I guess the big mistake then I think that most companies make, organizations, is that they focus only on the individual. They focus entirely on the individual. Any kind of well-being intervention is only aimed at the individual. And that is a part of it, as we know from those 4 avenues of influence, the personal health resources. What can we provide to the individual so that they can build up their own individual resilience? That is absolutely a part of it, but it is only one part. And that's a mistake, I think, if companies just focus just entirely on that. What are they doing? Or they're probably doing nothing in terms of looking at the work environment, physical, psychosocial, and then the communities piece. So it's a bit like they're almost trying to change the worker only, as opposed to changing the workplace.
Yes.
And it's probably a combination of both.
Yeah. And how do they get this feedback? I mean, let's say they are saying that we help everybody in need with resources, but how do they get feedback from employees on the culture, I guess, you're referring to?
Most companies of a decent size will have some kind of a survey, some kind of an audit in place, so you can learn from that. Probably close to the gold standard in Ireland, which again, it always amazes me, many people and organizations are not aware of, is workpositive.ie, which is a free psychosocial benchmark tool, which is HSA approved and University of Ulster. It's based on the HSE in the UK management standards.
Okay.
It's based on those. So it effectively, this will manage your compliance up to compliance level, at least in terms of your safety statement from a psychosocial risk perspective. So you can do that, but just because it's free does not mean you should just, get it out there.
No.
Huge mistake a lot of companies make. Because something's free, they use it. You need to have your plan in place as to, first of all, how you're going to be transparent about the results. Because if you haven't done this in a while, chances are you'll unearth a few challenges. You also need to have a plan in place for what are the top 3, top 5 issues identified.
Yeah.
And how are we going to tackle those?
Yeah.
Could we get maybe a little subgroup of employees together, empower them to actually look into this, to work on this, because they're the best place to find solutions, is those that are actually in a day-to-day facing these challenges. So that's the kind of plan you need in place. It's quite detailed, it's technical, there's about 35 questions in it. So it's not something you would just do in 5 minutes. You need to put a bit of thought into it.
Yeah.
That is not a bad starting place.
Yeah, well, it's good to know. But I agree. I think we have seen, at least in the last 10 years, a lot of survey culture, but not necessarily constructive work following. And
Yes.
the employees start distrusting these questionnaires and stop answering because there's no follow-up or they can't see any implementation of change, which is always hard. The hardest part is to work on the problems, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you have this background in tech and consulting and now technology, and we just started talking before we recorded about AI and technology. Do you think, and of course with following COVID, the hybrid situation, what do you think about this change and well-being?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time. I mean, the landscape is changing in front of us, which is interesting and it's exciting at the same time. I would say maybe version 1.0, if I could call it that, of technology in the well-being space. I don't think that was a fantastic success. A well-being app here and there, and sign up 10,000 of our colleagues. There's an app, more yoga than you can shake a stick at. Technology there's huge potential there. I think if it's used as an enabler of bringing people together, enhancing leadership, supporting connection, I think it could be huge. I love the approach that you're taking at Cara Connect, disrupting the EAP market and having technology then as a foundation for that, as a platform. That's really exciting. I only signed up yesterday to Anthropic and to Claude, and I'm playing around with that, and that's powerful. But yeah, I need to explore this more. I think version 1.0, we need to move on from that.
Yeah.
But version 2.0 actually could be really exciting. There's huge opportunities there for those that use it as an enabler.
Yeah.
Plus technology, plus people. What's the best fit?
Yeah. We are seeing kind of the financial world saying that psychologists will be AIs. But when you go into it, you just have to think 2 steps ahead and think, okay, what can this psychology say to you? And we've heard horrible stories from the US where some AI told the child to kill themselves. So we really need to step very carefully. But I agree with you. I'm super excited. I mean, there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming through and hopefully connections as well.
Yes.
I love one, it's called gratitude, and you can do a bubble of your family and share what was good, and this is something that has been proven over and over and again. If you think about 3 good things in your day, it absolutely makes your next day or morning or whatever.
Yes.
Something like that, when you can connect and share good things that impact everyone. I'm excited about it.
The more passive it could be, I think the better. If it can be passive, if you can embed it in your day,
Yeah,
as opposed to a tool you need to go to, if it's kind of embedded.
It's a behavior or habit that you implement.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that's very powerful. Well, can you share with our listeners like an organization that you worked with that was successful implementation and a story about how you work together?
Sure. Yeah. Lots of examples in Ireland, certainly at the moment. Perhaps leading by example, I would say maybe the transport agencies. So the big 3.
Yeah.
Ian Road Air and Bus Air and Dublin Bus. So they're doing a lot in this space. They're at it a few years now. So I mean, for those listening, don't compare your day 1 with their year 5. But they've had early on kind of senior leadership buy-in and commitment, kind of a mention of this in their corporate strategy. They've built a well-being strategy out of that is aligned with their corporate objectives, their business objectives, so that by working towards the well-being objectives, you're actually supporting the business objectives, which I think is key. So it gets leadership and really bought into this. As part of that, they have dedicated full-time roles. And I say roles, usually it's more than one in each organization, more than one full-time individual. So they've invested in that. They all have well-being networks, well-being champions that they've skilled up, they've trained up, that they continue to focus on. They have mental health first aiders, all of them. So they have a number of different peer support networks within their organization supporting the lead or the leads in their organization. And I mean, they back it up with actions, and they're far from perfect, and they'll tell you this themselves. They're still very much works in progress, but they gather really meaningful data around their employees.
Nice.
They don't do a one size fits all. So Irish Rail, Ian Roder, and I mean, there's a lot of train drivers there, a lot of engineers. So what they're doing, they're not approaching this this isn't something they're providing for the office-based staff. They're listening to drivers, listening to engineers, listening to office-based staff as well. And maybe they're tailoring then and targeting what they're doing for those specific cohorts. And I think almost all of them are award-winning at this stage in some shape or form. So that's working really well. Another really good example would be ESB. They're at this quite a few years, but they very recently had a look at their Wellbeing Champion network. Significant network across the country, lots happening, but maybe struggling for engagement with a number of them after the initial kind of buzz or apart from a few days of the year. So they listened to them, surveyed, focus grouped, and people said, well, how are we being recognized here? Where's the kind of recognition piece? So I think they've taken a really bold move, really exciting move, ESB. They've rebooted the whole team, the Wellbeing Champion team. So now every Wellbeing Champion at ESB now has, they call them OKRs, objectives and key results. So a KPI maybe to you and I, so which is of equal value to my business OKR and KPIs.
Yeah.
So it's important that I, hit this target every year, hit this objective. And not only that, but my line manager, if I'm a Wellbeing Champion at ESB, my line manager also has a Wellbeing OKR that they're supporting me in my role.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. So it's early stages, but I mean, I think that's exciting. I've seen some examples in the US of that. So effectively aligning with business objectives, it's filtering all the way through, it's into my personal objectives, so that this is of value to me, to the organization, so that I kind of, I need to kind of dedicate a little bit of time to this. So there's a positive for me if I get stuck in here as part of my eligibility for promotion, for my performance review meetings with my manager. It'll come up in conversation. It's embedded into the system at ESB, and I think that's crucial.
What you're telling us really is that this is not a launch and then well-being is set, but they're following through for many years and iterating and making sure the culture fits with the plans.
Exactly. I mean, a well-being program it's not a start and a stop. We're talking about embedding a culture of health here.
Yeah.
And those examples are effectively embedding or baking in. So we talk about baking in as opposed to bolting on. If you're kind of bolting something on at the end of the day or at lunchtime, people are too busy.
Yes.
But if you're baking something into an existing process, like the performance objectives, I'm already doing that.
Yeah.
Like your team meetings, I'm already doing that. The induction through to all hands, through to training programs, leadership pathways, right the way through to exit interviews.
Yeah.
I'm embedding this into the fabric of the organization.
Thank you for that, Brian. I tried to keep the podcast a little bit shorter than the regular ones, but I have a last question for you. What would be your advice to yourself if you were just graduating university right now for life?
Well, I suppose knowing what I know now and seeing what I see with all the students coming through the postgrad, I'd definitely be teeing myself up. I've just graduated, but that is literally the start of my learning journey.
Yeah.
I mean, lifelong learning is absolutely where it's at. So I'd be looking at it that way. Where do my interests lie? There's nothing out there now, thanks to technology, that I couldn't be at least fairly proficient in a couple of days if I spent a bit of time. Is it on YouTube? Is it on AI? Is it on some platform or some kind of formal program they can sign up to and a structured program? So that's what I'd be doing. I'd be just skilling up as much as possible. Yeah. I'd be finding my tribe as well. It's never been easier to find your tribe. Is that the Workplace Wellbeing Ireland community? Is it the Cara Connect community? Is it those practitioners? Is it the motorcycle club? There's so many tribes out there, and it's a lot easier to find now. So I'd be surrounding myself with those people. I'd be just learning what I can, and that's kind of the approach I'd be taking, just very much the growth mindset.
Very nice. And if you were turning 20 today, you would probably, live to 120. So you would be thinking of
Nice.
your body as well, right?
Certainly. My word for physical activity is consistency. There's no world records under threat, but I am incredibly consistent with my exercise regime.
Good habits. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Amazing. Thank you, Brian, for your time and good luck with your amazing company and your projects.
Thank you so much, Tobba. I really appreciate it. And listen, best of luck to you and to Cara Connect. I'm really excited watching how you guys are growing and disrupting over the next couple of years.
Thank you.